If you're trying to figure out where a modest retirement budget stretches further, Europe or Mexico, the honest answer is this. For most retirees from the US or Canada, Mexico usually wins on total monthly cost. But that does not automatically make Mexico the better choice for every retiree, because the smartest decision is not only about what looks cheaper on paper. It is about what you get for the money, how often you want to return home, how much visa friction you can tolerate, whether your retirement dream is built around convenience, culture, climate, healthcare, or maximum affordability. And that is where many retirees get this wrong. They compare airfare, rent, and maybe groceries, then stop. But the real monthly cost of retirement abroad is bigger than that. It includes the rent you can live with long-term, the neighborhood you feel comfortable in, the transportation style you need at this stage of life, the healthcare setup you will actually use, the cost of going home to see family, and the administrative burden of staying legal and comfortable over time. So in this video, we are going to answer the question the practical way. Where does a modest retirement budget stretch further, and for what kind of retiree? If you want realistic retirement travel comparisons that help you avoid expensive mistakes, subscribe to Travel Choir and turn on notifications. First, we need to define the comparison honestly. When retirees say Europe, they usually are not talking about Paris, London, or Zurich. They are usually talking about more affordable retirement favorites like Portugal, Spain, or parts of Southern Europe. That matters because if you compare Mexico to Europe's most expensive cities, Mexico wins easily. The more useful question is whether Mexico still wins against the lower-cost parts of Europe that retirees actually consider. For most modest budget retirees, it still does. Mexico generally offers a lower overall cost baseline than the European destinations retirees most often shortlist. That does not mean every place in Mexico is cheaper than every place in Europe. But it does mean the starting point favors Mexico if your first priority is stretching your money month after month. That also shows up in the lifestyle budgets retirees actually discuss. In many parts of Mexico, a retired couple can often live comfortably on a noticeably lower monthly budget than a similar couple in Portugal or Spain, especially once rent is included. Europe may still be affordable by North American standards in the right places, but Mexico usually gives a tighter budget more breathing room. So right from the start, the answer is not that Europe is unaffordable. It is that Mexico more often gives modest retirees a bigger cushion. If one category decides this comparison more than any other, it is housing. Housing is the cost that can quietly blow up a retirement plan, and it is also the category where broad stereotypes can mislead people most. Mexico can be very affordable, but not every famous expat destination is a bargain. Europe can be expensive, but not every smaller city in Portugal or Spain is out of reach. That means the better question is not, is Europe more expensive than Mexico? The better question is, which version of Europe and which version of Mexico are you comparing? A popular beach or resort area in Mexico can cost far more than a less glamorous inland city. In the same way, Lisbon or Barcelona will usually feel much pricier than smaller cities that still offer climate, culture, walkability, and decent infrastructure. In other words, the real contest is often not Europe versus Mexico in the abstract. It is premium expat Mexico versus practical Mexico, and major city Europe versus second-tier Europe. That is an important retirement lesson. If your budget is modest, you usually do not win by choosing the most famous address. You win by choosing the place that gives you the climate, healthcare access, and daily comfort you want without prestige pricing. In Mexico, that may mean looking beyond the most talked-about beach towns. In Europe, it may mean choosing a smaller Portuguese or Spanish city instead of the obvious big names. The retiree who does best on cost is often the one willing to be just a little less obvious. Now let's talk about the category retirees mention emotionally, but often budget weakly: healthcare. Europe has a strong reputation for quality care and stability, and in many cases that reputation is earned. Mexico, meanwhile, often surprises North American retirees who discover that private care can be more accessible and more affordable than they expected. But the mistake is assuming one side is automatically cheap and easy. In Europe, especially for non-EU retirees, private health insurance is often part of the residency path. So even if daily life feels appealing, you still need to factor in policy costs, age-related pricing, coverage limitations, prescriptions, and the reality that healthcare planning is part of the total retirement equation. Spain and Portugal can still be attractive, but they are not plug-and-play for retirees who want to move without preparation. Mexico can still come out cheaper here, particularly if you use private care selectively and live in places with strong medical infrastructure. But it is not cheap by default if you budget honestly. Insurance, medications, dental work, specialist visits, and travel to better hospitals all matter. A Mexico budget that focuses only on rent and groceries while ignoring medical planning is incomplete. This is one of the biggest traps in retirement abroad videos. People compare food, rent, and entertainment, then forget that healthcare is one of the categories that matters more, not less, after 55. And this is exactly why practical planning tools matter. Before you commit to a destination, it helps to compare insurance, healthcare access, and travel logistics as one system, not as separate afterthoughts. I've linked a few helpful resources in the description if you want to explore those pieces more realistically. Another category that becomes more important after 55 is proximity to home. Many comparisons treat this as a lifestyle bonus, but it is really a budget item. If you expect to go back to the US or Canada regularly for family, weddings, grandkids, medical appointments, or emotional reset time, Mexico often has a structural advantage. A retiree living in Mexico can often maintain a more flexible relationship with North America. That matters because retirement is not always a clean break from home. For many people, it is a hybrid life. And hybrid lives can get expensive fast when every trip home becomes a long-haul event with more airfare, more jet lag, more planning, and more recovery time. So when people say Europe is only a little more expensive, they often overlook the full system cost of living abroad. The total monthly cost is not just what you spend in your destination. It is what your whole cross-border life costs you to maintain. This is where Mexico often becomes the more practical choice, even for retirees who love Europe. Europe may win on charm, variety, and infrastructure, but Mexico often wins on ease of returning home without feeling that every trip back is a major financial and logistical event. Now let's move to the category that can completely change the value equation even when monthly costs look attractive. Bureaucracy. Europe feels elegant and aspirational in many retirees' minds, but for North Americans, that dream often runs into a practical limit if residency is not part of the plan. In much of Europe, the short-stay structure means you cannot simply drift indefinitely without paying attention to the calendar. That does not make Europe a bad retirement option. It just means Europe tends to reward retirees who are ready for more formal planning, more paperwork, and more structured timelines. Mexico often feels more forgiving in spirit, especially for retirees who are still testing what retirement abroad actually looks like. It can be easier to scout, easier to understand emotionally, and easier to connect to a North American lifestyle. But Mexico is not friction-free either. If you want long-term stability, residency planning still matters, and financial thresholds and consular requirements can be meaningful. So the difference is not that Europe equals bureaucracy and Mexico equals simplicity. The difference is that Europe often works better for retirees who want a more structured legal path, while Mexico often works better for retirees who want more flexibility while they learn what kind of retirement life they actually want. That is not a small difference. It affects not just stress levels, but the real value you get from your money. So who should seriously consider Europe even if Mexico is often cheaper? Europe makes sense for the retiree who values public infrastructure, walkability, slower urban rhythms, cultural depth, and the feeling of living in a very different world from North America. If your ideal retirement includes trains, old city centers, public squares, and easy regional exploration, Europe may justify the higher monthly burn. It can also make sense for retirees whose budget is a little stronger and who care more about lifestyle fit than pure cost efficiency. Some retirees do not want the cheapest option. They want the option that feels most fulfilling while still being financially responsible. For that kind of retiree, parts of Europe may absolutely be worth the extra cost. But if the real question is, where does a modest retirement budget stretch further? Mexico is still the stronger default answer. Mexico often costs less month to month, is easier to test before making a major commitment, and usually fits better with a retirement life that still includes regular ties to the US or Canada. It also gives you more room for mistakes, and that matters, because retirement abroad rarely goes exactly to plan in the first year. You may choose the wrong neighborhood, underestimate weather, overestimate walkability, or discover that the cheap place is cheap for a reason. When your destination is fundamentally more affordable, you usually have more room to adapt without blowing up the plan. That flexibility is incredibly valuable after 55. So my honest verdict is this. If your retirement budget is modest and your goal is maximum stretch, Mexico usually wins. If your budget is stronger and your priority is infrastructure, lifestyle texture, and a distinctly European living experience, then parts of Europe may still be worth the extra monthly cost. The smartest decision is not asking which region is better in general. It is asking which region is better for the way you actually want to live. And before we close, if you are comparing destinations seriously right now, check the links in the description. They can help you evaluate some of the practical pieces retirees often underestimate, especially around insurance, connectivity, and travel logistics. Sometimes, one good comparison before you move can save you from months of financial friction later. If this kind of practical retirement travel comparison helps you cut through the fantasy and make better decisions, subscribe to Travel Choir and turn on notifications. This channel is built for retirees who want more than inspiration. It is for people who want the systems, numbers, and real-world trade-offs that make freedom after 55 actually work. And before you make a big decision about Europe or Mexico, watch the next video. The fastest way to build a smarter retirement travel life is to compare the real costs before the expensive mistakes do it for you.